very quickly, if you look at any enterprise, right, there are primarily four types of devices. There is your guest device, there is IoT devices, you have BYOD users, and then your corporate users. So if you look at what we have done as part of the Mist journey over the last 3 to 4 years, we have built probably the most comprehensive guest solution. And yes, I put in the word captive portal in there. We started with a captive portal. Captive portals are kind of the abomination for guest Wi-Fi, with all the issues around the CNA, the pop-ups not working, etc. But we still supported it. And then over the last couple of years, we have built in every single workflow, whether it's around sponsored guests, whether it's around OAuth mechanisms with social credentials, even Hotspot 2.0, right? We are starting to see, especially in the retail market, customers starting to pilot Hotspot 2.0, and we have a good support. So we have built out a comprehensive guest solution, right? So what's next for us? Let's actually conquer IoT, BYOD, and the corporate devices or laptops and MacBook Pros, right? And for any of these different types of devices, what we want to get to is seamless onboarding, unified policy, most importantly, user experience, and having good visibility around who are the people, actors on my network, and who may not be sanctioned to be there, and overall stitch it together with a simplified operation story, right? So last November, we announced this service for Iot Assurance, and there are only a few key things to note about it. This was basically a service that came out of customers asking for a simple solution for headless IoT devices that do not support 802.1x authentication, right? EPLS, they are headless. So they have to use multi-pre-shared keys or private pre-shared keys. And what customers were struggling with was complex workflows in today's radius NAC solutions to get them onboarded, assign the right policy, do the right kind of traffic engineering. And then most importantly, right, when you think about a distributed enterprise and you are actually thinking about potentially hundreds of thousands of these different sensors in the context of retail networks, it could be your food safety, could be your thermal humidity sensors. In the context of the enterprise campus, it could be your HVAC and lighting. So all of these different thousands of devices need to be onboarded, and you need to do it at scale. And whatever we do at Mist, obviously, one of the foundational thing is AI, but the other thing, whatever we build, we do build for scale, right? So in a short video, we are basically just going to explore IoT assurance in action. And what this video is going to demonstrate is our capability to go and with a private pre-shared key, where we use the key as an identity, right? The MAC address is not the identity anymore. Why? Because over the last 3 years, we have seen Googles and Apples of the world, what they have done with Android, iOS, and random Macs, right? So where the key becomes the identity, how can I onboard the device? How can I assign the right policy, set them up for the right, whether it's tunneling or whether it's locally bridging the traffic? And most importantly, how do you provide visibility, right? So in this particular example, org-wide, we have thousands of keys that you can create. Literally, there is no limit to the number of keys. Now, keep in mind that all of this can potentially be done natively through whatever we provide, right? What we have done here is given you a portal to look at, administer, and lifecycle manage all of these different keys in a simple, easy to use manner with the right set of visibility. So here I'm actually honing on, you can have the email address or the identity of a user as your key name, right? And with that, you can actually go and assign a right segment of the network. So this will belong to VLAN such and such, and that IoT device will be on a different VLAN, all without the use of any kind of an overlay NAC radius system, right? So over here, you see VLAN 750 has been assigned to the particular key, the key again to stress is actually the identity, because that is what insulates it against your MAC randomization. And then with the role or with the right segmentation, you can decide that these set of IoT devices need to tunnel traffic to an application server that is in a data center somewhere. Whereas the rest of the devices, IoT devices or users sharing the same SSID could potentially just locally bridge their traffic, right? The next important thing is visibility, right? Who are the users that are actually currently using that particular key, right? There have been instances where people have actually done pilots, right? And as part of pilots, hey, I have this SSID, I have this pre-shared key. Let me actually go and administer these keys on these few devices. Then I'm done with my pilot, and then I've left those devices forgotten. That provides a security intrusion threat, right, in your building. So it's very important to have visibility into who all are using that pre-shared key, but most importantly, also have visibility on clients that have been registered to use, but currently not using that particular key. And that will give you some insights. The next thing that is important is around administration of keys. So as part of this service, we give you the portal from where you can actually look at administering or life cycle managing the keys. And probably it has not happened to any of you, but in many cases, what happens is that we go and rotate keys. So there's the left hand not talking to the right hand. Someone rotates the keys, and then the result is devices get disconnected. And we are going to be able to catch that through Marvis, our connection SLEs, but that is actually a real problem and ex post facto. So what if I could actually give you a very easy to administer process whereby you go and rotate your keys out without having to touch the end user or the connectivity of the end user. So here I'm going to filter for all of my, I filtered on IoT devices, and I'm just going to duplicate that key, right? So I'm going to duplicate that key such that all the connected users are still connected, and all of my, and then I can, on the original key, I can go do my key rotation, right? If I have to change attributes on the expiration or the number of devices that can connect, all of that is done through this process. Keith, you had a question.
Do you need anything on the client device that can accept that changed key?
Today we do, for any client device management, you need an MDM solution. So we are not claiming here to be your MDM solution, but what we are claiming to be is all of your identity vectors, we are going to just manage those, right?
The point, Keith, is that it is still the enterprise's responsibility to push the new keys to these devices. We're giving an option for old keys to work and new keys to work simultaneously, and showing you visibility of who's hanging on to dear life with the old keys.
Right.
Perfect. Thanks.
Thanks, Keith.
Oh, sorry, just to be clear, are these
Yes,
net new different keys, or the same key with different properties?
It is actually the exact same key. So what I did as part of this process was I duplicated the original key. The client devices are connected to the duplicate key while I go and rotate my, administer the original key. And then at the right time, that particular key can potentially be the passphrase or whatever needs to change can be administered on the client devices, right?
Because from the client's perspective, is it still using the same key?
Exactly.
And then on the infrastructure has different properties.
That is correct.
So the client doesn't care what's.
That is correct. Yes, the client doesn't care. So this is completely transparent to the client. Okay.
So connected to the same SSID that support the PPSK.
Yes.
So you can have clients that have different policies and their traffic get tunneled somewhere, and then you can have other clients that get locally switched.
That is correct. On the single SSID, we can achieve microsegmentation through roles, and you will be able to tunnel one set of devices. So my Sony IoT devices need to go to talk to the Sony application server. I cannot let that touch my corporate network. That can get tunneled. And by the way, our tunneling solution is Mist Edge, a shameless plug over there. Bob talked about it, like, it's a wonderful solution. So they are all going to get tunneled to a Mist Edge, and the traffic will be dropped at a POP,
So you,
while the others will be locally bridged.
and you configure that at the WXLAN policy level, or?
Well, you can actually do that just by your network segment. So, like, you can use VLAN 750 on that SSID for tunnel traffic. You can use VLAN 710 for all your locally bridged traffic.
Okay.
Right.
And then the PPSK works with WPA3, I assume?
PPSK WPA3 is currently a work in progress, and potentially just stay tuned. Like, we will have an update for you soon.
Okay.
Having a hard time tying this with VXLAN and the policy. So how do you tie? How do you?
Great question. So as I was kind of alluding to with Avril, the cloud is a place where we stitch things together, right? So you might actually have a policy framework for VXLAN using GBP. On the wireless side, like, we have WXLAN. On the cloud side, the needful stitching goes through and the right policies get pushed out to access points and switches, right? Whether it's like, an ACL or like, or whatever it may be, or a WXLAN policy. So I'm just going to move forward to the next use case, and that is around extension. And this is basically a work in progress to be released hopefully by end of this month. Like, if you are familiar with, like, BYOD, like, workflows, they can get awfully complex. And many times people need simple mechanisms for students in a higher ed, like, campus, or corporate devices, corporate users bringing their own devices and self-administering, like, how to get their devices on the network. So as we were developing this, the private pre-shared key or multi-pre-shared key based IoT assurance solution, we are extending that, and to be released this month, hopefully, like, with what we call the self-provisioning portal extension to IoT assurance. And what that allows you to do is use say, for example, your directory will have the identity of the user, a credential, and you are going to, it is completely self-administered. A user goes and enters his or her credentials. We are going to do a role lookup, like, whether it's Okta or Azure or ADFS, and then we are going to get a QR code returned back to the user. The user can just scan the QR code and basically get on the network, right? So we stitched together a demo that basically shows the process through this role integration with Okta. So, like, over here, so this is basically the client onboarding piece. And if I just fast forward a little bit, so you, as part of your administration, like, you are going to provide a URL for all of the users to go and register themselves, right? So that is basically, so we provide you with a Psk Portal Configuration. This is basically where you provide your IDP information. And then from, like, you also will modify the different attributes of that particular PSK. So things like, if you have to assign a VLAN, or you have to assign, like, an expiration, and all that configuration is out there. So from a user experience perspective, what it looks like is, in this particular case, I'm going to, like, a URL that has been advertised. This is basically your Okta is used as a role directory provider. I'm going to go and, like, enter my email address over there. The email address is basically the identity of the user on the directory. I am signing in, and we have, once the authentication actually goes through, there's a callback to our portal, and we are going to give you a QR code. You can scan the QR code and get on the network. And the rest of the demo covers that. In the interest of time, I'm just going to skip this particular demo and move on to the last bastion that we are yet to conquer. Right. So if you have, so we have talked about guest, we have talked about IoT, we have talked about BYOD. So really the last thing to tackle is what do we do with, like, for corporate users, right? And for the longest time, we actually have very good integration with Cisco ICE, Aruba, ClearPass, Forescout, pretty much, or Microsoft NPS, FreeRadius, anything that you can think of, we have very well documented, tight integration of how we ingest filter ID attributes from ClearPass into our WXLAN policy, etc., right? But as and when we were building this solution up, we started to look at, what is really wrong with today's overlay systems for MAC and radius. And really, there are three things that kind of jump up. Number one is deployment and provisioning, is basically a pain. Even if they offer, software containers, it's rack and stack virtualization, not quite microservices driven. But more importantly, the examples that you have seen today, there is no single system that is actually correlating data from the edge, the client data from the edge or the client experience from the edge to what is going on in the rest of the network. So today what we do is we highlight that if a user has had an authentication problem, we will say that go check the radius side of the house, right? Especially if Wi-Fi or wired is not to blame. But someone still needs to know what is going on the radius system, and you have to go through log mining and parsing to figure out what is wrong and what is broken, and that is basically a pain for the user. And then last but not least, goes to all the solutions being non-cloud native, non-cloud driven, they lack the agility and scale. So in the world of Mist, we've actually solved all this problem in the enterprise edge, right? So our aspiration is to really provide bring the same microservices architecture and the AI-driven insights that we have done for network devices, and then bring it into the NAC radius market, right? So this is not a product announcement. This is not a launch of any kind, but I'm just going to give you a teaser of what that actually looks like in our world. And role, if you've seen WXLAN, it will seem very familiar. One of the important aspects is the policy configuration, right? And what we show in this demo is a simplified, policy framework instead of having to go through 3 or 4 different tabs to have simple policies for your wired and wireless devices. This is set up like a WXLAN engine where you have, your wireless devices that are using ETLS authentication. On the left-hand side are all the different, identities, the different users, and the attributes that will provide rules to match on. So you're going through this list like a regular firewall, trying to find the best match and assign the right set of policies and rules, right? So here we're showing it's a wireless user using ETLS. Corporate, and you can filter on subject of a certificate. If the subject of the certificate is this, I am now going to put that user in that corporate VLAN and potentially assign an advanced role, right? Similarly, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but if you look at, we do this exact same thing for wired devices, so if you have a .1x device, or if you're doing MAB and it's a printer, you will assign it the printer VLAN, right? So this is basically one aspect of what we are bringing to the table. On the surface of it is a simplified policy framework that can be now pushed to the switches and the access points. And by the way, the goal number 1 is to do this on Juniper Mist devices, and eventually we are going to expand over to third-party infrastructure. I am going to go to the money slide here. Basically, this is the bread and butter of where the problems today lie, right? And it is this troubleshooting, what is going on the infrastructure and the clients, and what is going on the radius side. And as I said, Avril, cloud is a place where we are stitching all of this together, right? So here you are going to basically see that when I've had an authorization failure, an authentication fail, exactly why did the authentication fail? Did your certificate, have an expired year? Was it incorrect? So on and so forth, right? Yes, Francois.
So the Radius server is in the cloud, and you're getting all of that Radius log into Marvis for.
That is exactly correct, right? It's a very resilient, high availability architecture with lots of geo-redundant pods that are going to, and I'm probably getting a bit ahead of myself. We will come back and do an architecture deep dive. But to answer your question simply, yes. So we are taking all of the data. The cloud is where we configure. The cloud is where we get visibility. But the Radius authentication really happens at a point of presence closer to the user location.
Okay.
Yes,
Will
Roel.
this integrate with something like Eduroam? So if I've got
It will.
different,
Eventually that is the goal. Whatever mechanisms we have today, whether it's Hotspot 2.0, to be the, kind of the provider for a clearinghouse, or, all of your OAuth, social credentials, all of that is going to be stitched and come under this umbrella. Open roaming, right.
So Francois and Roel, what Mist has done to the wireless players in the industry when we started is what we're planning to do, what this is going to do for ICE and ClearPass, right? Completely step function change the paradigm of how policy get administered natively to the systems and cloud native, right? So Francois, to your point, the Radius server is not in the cloud. The Radius server is the Mist cloud, right? So anyway, we're not ready for pilots and production yet, but we're excited. We're just showing you the progress we're making. I think we're going to put the industry on notice on when this truly comes out. It's going to be an exciting sort of a turn in the industry in terms of policy and act. Well, thank you very much for everybody that are watching the live stream. If you're watching this recording, post processed, or for all the delegates sort of in the room, truly again, as we started, you are part of our extended family. You've really helped us throughout this journey, and I hope what you saw today is very simply a manifestation of our sort of client to cloud strategy of continuing to add, breadth and depth in this client to cloud journey. And obviously there's a lot more to do. There is a lot more we can do, Everil, to your point of things we can do. So the last thing I will tell you, what is around the corner and what is, exciting as the year unfolds for us is, where does Marvis go? Where we think Marvis can go is, imagine if Marvis had an army of minions, doing things and learning and coming back and reporting and asserting on the network before a single individual user has to suffer. We believe there is a even better future on we could get to AI that is not predictive, not reactive, but 100% proactive before users experience a single failure. So there's a lot more. We're excited about what's around the corner for us. Think of Marvis with a bunch of minions, checking out the network and validating it for you.